Are you fluent in Spanish? Maybe you know somebody that claims to be fluent. Somebody says, hey, I'm 100% fluent. What does that mean, really? We're going to address that today. We're going to get into the details of what it means to be fluent. And by the way, there's a path. There's a very formally defined path to fluency that has 6 stages. We're going to define what all that means in today's video. My name is Scott Bryan. I'm the founder of the Calisthenian Method. It's all about speaking fluency, and so this is a very important topic and that everyone should understand. If you're on the path, if this is something that's of interest to you, it's important to understand where you are. And oh, by the way, there's stages of fluency. There's 6 of them. A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. There's a very well-defined path. We're going to explain what all of that means today so you can see where you are and, quite honestly, where you want to get to. So let's dive in. Ahora mismo. So to get started, I want to introduce you to what's known as the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, CEFR. This is a European body that defines what it means to be fluent in a language. This applies not to Spanish, but to all languages. And look, it's as good as any. I've never heard of another formal definition of fluency, but I stumbled across this and I found it to be quite useful. And to break it down, essentially it has 3 buckets: beginning, intermediate, and advanced. And the definitions fall into those categories. There's 2 stages in each bucket, if you will. So in the beginning stage, there's what we call the A's. A1 and A2 are the beginning level definitions, and B1, B2 is intermediate, and the advanced levels are C1 and C2. This model, by the way, applies to all elements of language learning. Our focus, my focus, is really about applying that to that of speaking fluency. With that said, and now I'm going to take you through what each of these categories mean. So we'll get into that right now. So let's start with the beginning levels of A1 and A2. A1 being what we call survival level. It's the very beginning. A2 is more the tourist level. Okay, now you're on vacation. You have some things you want to say, all that kind of stuff. And so what does this mean? You have limited vocabulary. That's one of the challenges, but there's limitations across the board. So what is A1? A1 is, me llamo Scott, ¿cómo te llamas? I would like a coffee, please. Really simple stuff, simple commands. Everything's present tense, not a lot of conjugations, very limited vocabulary. You're introducing who you are, asking some basic questions. It's just survival, if you will. It's just the very beginning of this. A2, we define it as elementary or tourist level. Okay, so now you've got 1,000 or more words under your belt, some tenses, but really you're still speaking in the present tense. Here's a few examples of what you might say. Trabajo en una oficina pequeña cerca del centro de la ciudad. Trabajo en una oficina. I work in an office, a small office in the center of the city. At this stage, you probably studied and understand a little bit of the tenses, so you can do a little past tense, maybe future tense, but really very limited. Another example might be, voy a visitar mi amigo. I'm going to visit my friend this weekend. So now you're able to at least communicate a few things. Again, you're talking in present tense, maybe a little bit in the past. You could say, me voy a, I'm going to do something. So you're alluding to the future there. Again, very limited. That's where you start. Intermediate level. So this is a very interesting and challenging phase, I think, in the path to fluency. I think it's the one where everyone struggles and a lot of people jump ship and just give up. Because it's interesting because at this level, you're starting to really understand the structure, all the conjugations. You have all the grammar, the structure, the knowledge. You're now at a couple thousand words, at least a 2,000 to 4,000 range, and you're increasing in that. So it's all there mentally. Your ability to then say it and communicate it is really hard, and you got to really dial in and practice and focus on this. But so what does this mean? Let's talk about B1. So at this point, you have a lot of the knowledge. So in theory, at this point, you understand all verb conjugations. You can understand imperative, you understand the subjunctive mode, but putting that into practice from a speaking standpoint is super hard because it's just so foreign to you, no pun intended. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of what you should be able to do and people can start doing, okay? You can say things like, si tuviera más tiempo, estudiaría español todos los días. Si tuviera más tiempo, if I had, it's the subjunctive version of tener. Si tuvieras más tiempo, estudiaría. And think about this. I'm actually, because I'm at I think a C1 level currently, I can pronounce all this stuff pretty well, but your pronunciation's working. There's a lot that's hard here. In theory, you should say that. In practice, are people saying that subjunctive at B1? No, I personally don't think so. Llámame cuando llegues, ¿vale? Llámame cuando llegues, ¿vale? That means call me when you arrive, okay? And again, so this one's, again, you now understand this. Here's another one. Cuando era niño, soñaba con viajar por el mundo. You can look at this stuff on paper and you go, yeah, I understand that because my vocabulary is decent. Cuando era niño, when I was a little kid, soñaba con viajar. Sonar con, that means to dream. I dreamt about traveling the world. Viajar el mundo, por el mundo. Again, you see it, you understand it. It's really hard to communicate. That's my take on B1. Okay, let's move to B2. B2 now you have 4,000 words. And you're getting better. I would just simply describe it as that. So what are some things you should be able to say? You're now expressing opinions and you're getting a little more nuanced in what you can say. But again, I think of it more as you're just able to communicate what you know in your brain a little better. Dudo que muchas personas practiquen todos los días. Dudo, I doubt that many people practiquen, not practican, practiquen. It's the subjunctive version of practicar. Dudo que muchas personas practiquen todos los días. Es posible que me haya explicado mal. Es posible que me haya explicado mal. It's possible that it was explained poorly. Although I make errors, puedo explicar lo que pienso. I can explain what I was thinking without a doubt. Again, and if you're listening to this and you're going, oh shit, I think I'm at that level, but I can't hear what he's saying. Again, it's tricky because you're also having to take it in and learn what that stuff sounds like. Pronunciation is important, etc. So there you go. That's intermediate. Super challenging is what I would say. Now for the advanced levels. Okay, to me, this is a massive accomplishment. When you enter, this is nirvana. I have arrived. I've achieved something. At this point, now all of a sudden, you can say a lot of those things that you knew pretty well. You're able to communicate them. And because you do that and your vocabulary now is increased, now we're in the, I don't know, look at this, 8,000 word kind of level. Or more. And again, it's a spectrum, that varies. But the big difference here is now all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you can because you're speaking, you've worked on your pronunciation, you can communicate, you can hear a lot better, and so then you respond. And when you respond and you do all this stuff, it starts to work. And you feel like, wow, I have arrived, okay? So here's some examples of C1. And you're expressing with more fluency and a little more profundidad, a little more depth. No creo que sea tan difícil, pero requiere constancia. I don't think it's that difficult. No creo que sea tan difícil. Sea. Subjunctive tense. Pero requiere constancia. It requires, ongoing work. Me alegra que me lo hayas dicho. Me alegro que me lo hayas dicho. Those funny little pronouns, me lo hayas dicho, that you have told me this to me. That's, again, it's one thing to read that on a piece of paper. It's another, all of a sudden you can say it. Wow, that's massive. Again, more of the same, right? It's just challenging. And then when you get into C2 is, again, what we consider Near native fluency. Again, I think that's reserved for the few, the proud. Wow, you're all in. You're honestly, to really get C2, I think you're going to have to almost spend some time in an environment where you're speaking it all day long. At this point, I would tell you that I think the real difference, your vocabulary bumps to 15,000 words or something. There's so much slang and noise and nuance at that level that it's, wow. I have great aspirations personally. I don't know that I'll ever get there. Near native it's a whole different animal. And I would say a lot. Here's a stupid little example. La verdad es que si no metes la pata de vez en cuando, no estás aprendiendo. Si no metes la pata de vez en cuando, no estás aprendiendo. Metes la pata. If you're not putting your, what is pata? Your paws. Putting in your paws. It's an expression, meterse la pata. If you're not getting in trouble every once in a while, you're not learning. If you're not making big mistakes, you're not learning. A lot of nuances and details. At this point, you know all that stuff, and you're throwing in a lot of slang. Imagine in English, if you got kids and they're throwing new words and making stuff up as they go. This is what we're talking about at C2. So good luck with that. That is a super challenge. But this is a fun, when you're at this stage, wow, you're there. I say I achieved fluency in a year because I got to these early stages of C1. All right, so what does all this mean? Really, I just wanted to level set, give you a feel for where you are, and then the road ahead, what's to come. And look, my intention is not to depress you and think that it's just unachievable. Absolutely believe with the right strategy and approach and the time, it could be a super fun, enjoyable process. That was absolutely the case for me, and it continues to be. I'm continuing. I'm at the C1, kind of working my way through that, and it's fun. I thoroughly enjoy it, but you gotta have realistic expectations. And so, as I've referenced previously, I've got a paper that describes all this so you can read it and internalize it on my website if you want to check that out. Thanks for the time. And don't forget our website dedicated to all things speaking Spanish, calistanmethod.com.